So we are up to Daf Mem Gimel Page, even though we got up to Mem Dalet Amud Aleph, but we're sort of in the middle of something. The Gemara said that if you don't mefarish a brisa like Zeiri, you don't have pshat. In other words, nothing comes to Zeiri's pshat. He knows how to fatach a difficult brisa. So the brisa that we quoted was as follows. It was a very cryptic brisa, and this is what it says. Find it over here. Masnisa the Tanya. This is what the Beraisa says. It's a very cryptic Beraisa. It says as follows: Im nemru kalois, loma nemru chamuris. So just so we should have even a half a meaning of what's going on over here, we're talking about the avera of eating meiser when one is tamei, and the avera of eating truma when one is tamei. Now, the Torah does tell us the halach is if one eats meiser when one is tamei, one is over alav. If one eats truma when one is tamei, one is over alav and is chayiv misa b'dei shemayim tezumeisa b'kiyah chalalu. But there's also two types of tumas. There's a tuma kala, like a tuma sheretz, where you go to the mikveh and you're tar, and then there's the tumas meis, where you need to have zrika of the paraduma. So it's fuzzy what this means. Im nemru kalosh, if it says kalosh, lama nemru chamurosh. So just for ease of understanding the Gemara, I'm going to assume that now what the Beraisa means when it says kalosh and chamurosh is meiser and chamurosh is truma. So im nemru kalosh, if the Torah tells us that there's a lav to eat meiser when you're tamei, lama nemru chamurosh. Why did the Torah have to tell us by truma? Vim nemru chamurosh, and the Torah told us by truma that there's an isser to eat it when you're tamei. Lama nemru kalis. Why did it say kalis? Means why did it say it by meiser? So the Beraisa answers: Im nemru kalis v'loy chamurosh. If we only had a pasuk by meiser but not by truma, I would have said ala kalos belav, the eating meiser when you're tamei, you're chayav alav, v'ala chamurosh b'misa, and eating truma when your tamei is b'misa. So that's the first line of this Beraisa. So let's just analyze this for a second. I would say that v'ala chamurosh b'misa. That sounds like it's like wrong, right? You would say kamash malon chamurosh, but guess what? That's exactly what the halach is. The chamurosh is b'misa. If you eat truma when you're tamei, it is b'misa. So what does the Beraisa mean? Say hayisi yomer ala kalos b'lav ala chamuris b'misa. That's number one. Number two, if it didn't say chamuris and it only say kalos, how in the world would I know chamuris b'misa? I can't learn it from a kal v'chomer from kalos. Madach kalos is allowed. Kol shkein truma there's misa. That's dayay lovim and nois kenidayin. So this whole Beraisa doesn't make sense. Lekach nemur chamuris. That's why it said chamuris. V'im nemur chamuris, and if it only said truma, v'loy nemur kalos, hayisi yomer I would have said ala chamuris yei chayiv. Maybe you're only chayiv anything if you eat truma when you're tamei, but lakalish potter, that makes sense. Lakach nemru kalish. That's why he said kalish. Frank the Gemara, my kalish and my chamuris. In this Beraisa, what does kalish mean and what does chamuris mean? So I already read the Beraisa like the Gemara's first thought. Ilay mekalish meiser and chamuris is truma. So hayisi aimer b'misa. I would have said if it wasn't for the fact that the Torah spoke about truma, I would have said it's b'misa. Well, that's very good if I would have said that. Because hashtanami, ha-b'misa. That's what takot halach is b'truma. Visu, how would I know misa by truma if I'm learning it from meiser where it's merely a lav? The Eloi nemer yisa b'misa, da'i lavim in liyosh kenidai. So I would have, that's not true. We would have never said that truma is b'misa. Ella, because of that, we're going to have a whole different shot. And we're going to try that. We're going to try using tuma kala and tuma chamur. Alakalish is tuma sheretz, and chamurais is tuma semeis. So now the question is: are we talking about truma or are we talking about meiser? So umay, let's try it on. Even truma. Let's say we're talking about truma. So let's go back through the Beraisa and see how that would fit in. Zok the Gemara, Zok the Mishnah as follows: Im nemru kalois. If it already said that if you're tamei b'tuma sheretz, you're not allowed to eat truma. Why did the Torah have to say that if you're tamei with tumas meis? you're not allowed to eat truma. V'inamru chamurais, and if it said chamurais, if the Torah tells us that a tamei meis may not eat truma, lama nemru kalois. Why did the Torah tell you that a tumas sheretz may not eat truma? Im nemru kalos v'loy chamurais. If it would have only told us that someone who eats a sheretz is chayiv misa b'dei shemayim if he eats truma, but it didn't say it's by a tamei meis, I would have said ala kalois belav. I would have said that for a tumas sheretz would be a lav, the ala chamurais, and by tumas meis I would say b'misa. Lakach nemru chamurais. So let's have a look how that would work out. Uvamai ibe truma idi v'idi hu b'misa. What do you mean? I would have said that the kalois is the kalois is just a lav and the chamurais is b'misa. The halach is even if someone is tamei with a tuma kala, such as tuma sheretz, if they eat truma, they're going to be chayiv misa b'dei shemayim. Visu lekach nemru chamurais the belav. That's why it says by chamurais to teach you that it's a lav, which is how the Beraisa finishes off. Habamisi. The halach is if someone eats truma and he's tamei, no matter what type of truma it is, he's chayiv misa. So that's if you try learning the Beraisa that's talking about truma. Now let's try it with Meiser. Maybe it'll work better with Meiser. Viv achilas Meiser. And again, what did the Beraisa say? If it would have said only kalois, that it is an isur lav to eat Meiser if you're tamei from a sheretz, lama nemru chamurais. Why did it say that I'm tamei with a tumas meis that there's an isur to eat Meiser? And what would I have said? Again, it doesn't make sense. What would I have said? I would have said that the chamuris b'misa. Why would I say that? So zok to Gemara, im loy nemru chamurais hayisiyomer al chamuris b'misa. Why would you say that? If you're learning it from tumakala, by tumakala to tumasheretz, where we know if someone who's talking about tumasheretz eats meiser, it's a lav. It's not misa b'dei shemayim. So how would you be able to say from there that if someone is tumas meis, they'll be chayiv misa? So the problem is, every which way we try to understand kalos and chamurais, the Beraisa doesn't make sense. So when you have a Beraisa that you're stuck and you can't get kupshatin, who comes to the rescue? Zeiri comes to the rescue because he can for Beraisas like no one else. So Omar Zeiri, I'll tell you what it is. It's not complicated. It's quite simple. Kalois is referring to tumas sheretz, like in our second tribe, and chamurais are referring to tumas meis. The hachikam, this is what the Beraisa means to say. Ilu nemar tumas sheretz. If it was the Torah was talking about tumas sheretz, v'nemar meiser truma, and the Torah told us that by meiser there's a lav, and by truma there's a misa b'dei shemayim. If you're tumas sheretz and you eat truma, but v'loy nemar tumas meis. But the Torah wouldn't have addressed a tamei meis that ate truma or a tamei meis that ate meiser. What would I have said would happen by a tamei meis? I would have said as follows: kalos ala kalos bala. If you have a tuma kala, like your tamei b'sheretz, and you ate meiser, which is a davar akal, there's a law for that. V'yada chamurais, if you are merely a tuma kala, meaning your tuma sheretz, but you ate truma, it'll be b'misa. So you see, there's two factors here. There's what you're eating, and there's a level of tumah that you have. If one is chomer and one is kal, there's a chiv misa. If the tumah is kal, but the aver is chomer because it's truma, it will be b'misa d'shavayim. So maybe the other way around as well. With the kalos ala chamuris b'misa, maybe chamuris nami ala kalos b'misa. And that's what the Gemara says. If it said kalos and didn't say chamuris, I would have thought that even by meiser, if you're tamei with a tumah chamura, you're a tamei with a tumas meis, you'll also be chayiv misa b'dei shemayim. Just like if you were tamei b'tumah kala and you ate a davar chamer like truma, you'll be chayiv misa b'dei shemayim. L'kach nemru chamurais. Therefore, the Torah tells us that even by chamurais, even if someone is tamei b'tumas meis and he eats meiser, he's only like it. He does not have misa b'dei shemayim. So that was a beautiful pshat, poshet pshat, that Zeiri offered us in the Beraisa, and that's what the Gemara was celebrating. What a great lamdan Zeiri was, he explained Braisas like nobody else. Okay, Zokt, the next line of the Mishnah. Kol sheyesh le matirin. Anything that has matirin, bein l'adam, bein l'mizbeach. So whether we're talking about meat that the person eats after the dam is spritzed, or if we're speaking about a murin that are placed on the mizbeach after the dam is spritzed, the halach is chayav in the lov mishum pigel. That's called a nitar, a dover nitar, and the dover nitar will become osur machmos pigel, and if the carbon is pigel, there'll be a chiyuv chorus to eat these items. Tanu Rabbanan, oy einay mevi ela kayoytze b'shlam. So we're literally jumping in the middle of a Beraisa. We know that the whole parsha of pigel was taught to us where in the parsha of Korban Shlomim. That's where we learned all about pigel. And Rashi tells us, oy einay, reisha the Beraisa b'teres kahanim, the beginning of this Beraisa that we literally jumped in the middle of, the Indian pigel katani. The Beraisa was referring to pigel. And the Beraisa says, I would have thought that there's only the whole Torah of pigel, the whole sugya of pigel, only applies by a Korban Shlomim. That's where the Torah tells us about it. Talmud loymar le'inyan tumah, where the Torah talks about a completely different avera. The Torah talks about tumah. It says v'yinozri mikachim. Kohanim or atomim must stay away from kachim. So let me just have a quick look in the pasuk. It says, "Daber el aharon ve'elbonav, v'yinozru mikachim b'nei Yisrael." They should stay away from kachim when they are tamei. V'lo yechalu Hashem kachi asher heim makdishim. What type of kachim is this pasuk prohibiting kohanim tameim from touching? Every type of kachim. So therefore, Zoktun's the Beraisa. Yes, by pigel the Torah is speaking about shlomim. But by Tumah, it says v'yinozmi kachim, it's referring to all type of kachim. Ulakaman yolef noiser chilul mituma. We will know that noiser applies by all karbanos because there's a lashon of chilel below yechalo shem kachi in the pasuk of Tumah, and in the pasuk of noiser the Torah uses a pasuk of oichlav avoino yisak he es kodesh Hashem chilel. And once you know that by noiser it applies by all karbanis, you learn pigel from noiser, but avoy nova and mi noiser, because by pigel it says vayichlav avoino yisa, and by noiser it says avoino yisa. So that's the Beraisa that we're in the middle of. So zog to Gemara, oy einay marba ela kayoyte. So let's see that where we are now. Oy einay maivi ela kayoyte b'shlam. Or maybe we're not including all of the different karbanos in the prohibition of pigel, in the parsha of pigel, rather only karbanos that are similar to a shlomim. In what way? Ma shlomim miyuchadim nechalim l'shnei yomim v'layla echad. Shlomim is unique from all of our karbanos that it's man achila are 2 days. Av kol nechal l'shnei yomim v'layla echad. The Gemara is going to tell us that that's talking about bechor. But nechal yom v'layla minayin. What about most karbanos that are only eaten for the day that the carbon is brought and the following night? How do you know that these karbanos are similar enough to a carbon shlomim that pigel should apply to them as well? Talmud loymar mi bisar. So it says in the pasuk in the parsha of pigel, v'me'achel ye'achel mi bisar zevach shalomah. It could have just said v'me'achel ye'achel mi shlomah. Bisar and zevach are extra words. So mi bisar tells you kol sheshirayin necholin, any carbon that its leftovers are eaten. So not only a shlomim, a chatos, any carbon that the meat is eaten from. But what about oila she'ein shir necholin? And the oila where nothing's eaten. Minayin, how do you know to extend the parsha pigel to the oila as well? Talmud loymar zevach. Minayin l'rabois ha'oifois v'amenachos. How do we know that pigel will impact oifois, menachos, achadimar beloik shemen shel mitzayra? Even to extend the prohibition of pigel should even impact loik shemen shel mitzayra. Zok Gemara, and of course we know the loik shemen shel mitzayra. We had a discussion in our Mishnah. If pigel applies to it, according to Reb Meir, pigel does apply to it. Talmud loymar It says in the pasuk Asherheim Makdishim Li. By the parsha of Tumah, where it says V'Yinozru, it says it's kosher in Yisrael Asherheim Makdishim Li, any type of kosher. But Asi Noisar Chilo Mituma. The same way by the Isra Tumah, it applies to all kosher, using a Zeir from the word Chilo stated by Tumah to the word Chilo stated by Noisar, that by Noisar as well, it applies to all karbanis. Also, Pigel Avain min Noisar. And then Noisar can spread the exciting word to Pigel using the Zeir Shava of Avain. So that's how we know that Pigel applies to all karbanis. Frank the Gemara. Is called over. So since at the end of the day, anyway, the Torah has a limud to tell us that Pigel applies to every carbon, so Loma never Shlomim. So why Taka did the Torah mention the carbon Shlomim when they're talking about Pigel? The Torah could have used the same lashon like it used by Tumah and Yikachim, but the Torah specified the carbon Shlomim. Why would the Torah have done that? Obviously, there's a reason to be learned. There's a reason to learn from that. Zok Gemara Lamanim or Shlomim Me'ata Loimerlach Mashlomim Meyuchodim Sheyesh Lahen Matirin Bein La'adam Bein Milzbech. Just like by Shlomim, the dam is matter, the basar la'adam, and the emur l'mizbech. So too, Pigel only applies to something that has a matter and a niter. Af kol sheyesh le'matirin bein la'adam bein l'mizbech chayavin alei mishum Pigel. Ha'oila, the carbon oila, there is a matter and a niter. Dama matter es besar l'mizbech. V'oira l'kayhanim, and it also is matter, the hide of the animal to be given to the kayhanim. Oila sa'oif. The oila sa'oif, dama matter es besar l'mizbech. The dam, the zrikas dam is matter, the putting the meat of the bird on the mizbech. Chata sa'oif, dama matter es besar l'kayhanim. The dam is matter that the kayhanim can eat it. Right? We had this yesterday that there's a limud from a pasuk that they eat it. Parim hanisrafim, usehirin hanisrafim. Now, if you remember, we had a machlokes in our Mishnah if parim hanisrafim and sir hanisrafim if they're doimim to a shlomim or not, because maybe since there is none of the meat that you're makriv b'chutz, you're makriv on the mizbeach, maybe there would not be a din pigel. So let's see what this Beraisa says about it. Parim hanisrafim usir hanisrafim. Damam mater es emureim li karev. We're including that as well, because this is also considered a mater and an eater, because the dam is mater the emurim, even though the meat doesn't go on the mizbeach. So this is not like the sheet in our Mishnah who holds that the din of pigel won't apply to parim hanisrafim. So what is not included in the prohibition of pigel? What are we moitzi from the fact that the Torah gives us the halacha of pigel by shlomim? Umoitzi aniyas hakaimates v'asalavoina v'aktoyres uminchas kaihanim uminchas koin Mashiach uminchas nesachim v'hadam. So these are the items listed in our Mishnah as things that don't have a din pigel.
So why don't we just say all animals?
I'm sorry?
Don't say anything that moves. Anything that moves.
Because it's not just animals, right? It's even the loik shem and shalom tzayir is also included. Now we also know that the nesachim, the minchas nesachim, is also controversial, right? We had a machlokes about that in our Mishnah between Reb Meir and Rabbanan. Reb Shimon said, "Ma shlomim miyuchadim sheyesh boy al mizbech achitzayin." Shlomim has a feature that its meat is brought on the mizbech achitzayin. V'chayavin alav. I'm sorry, it's emurin are brought on the mizbech achitzayin. V'chayavin alav, and you're chayiv pigel because of it. Av kol sheyeshtan al mizbech achitzayin. So too, only things that you're maktir the emurim on the mizbech achitzayin chayavin alav mishum pigel. Yatzu parim hanisrafim usirim hanisrafim hoyol she'ein al mizbech achitzayin kishlomim ein chayavin alav mishum pigel. So this is also the Reb Shimon in our Mishnah, who holds that there's no din pigel on the parim hanisrafim usirim hanisrafim because they don't share the similarity with shlomim that its emurin are put onto the mizbech. So now we have our parameters of when pigel applies we have it from a combination of the limudim that tell us it applies to all karbanos, and we balance that out against the fact that the Torah says it by a shlamim to exclude either karbanos that don't have a matter and a niter, or according to Reb Shimon, karbanos that you're not makter or anything on the mizbech. That's our Beraisa. Now we're going to dissect it. Amar Mar, kayoyte b'shlomim. The Beraisa first said, I would have thought, if it wasn't for the pasuk that we learned from the Parsha of Tumah, using chilul, avoin, I would have thought that the only types of karbanos that would have it in pigel would be very similar to shlomim, which are nechal l'shnei yomim v'yemechal. Mind you, what other carbon out there can you eat for 2 days and 1 night? The nechal l'shnei yomim v'layla echad. A bechor is the only other carbon that has the same eating pattern as a shlom. How would you know it? How would you know that pigel applies to a carbon other than shlomim that's listed in the parsha? Even memetzinu, if you just learn it from a memetzinu, you find over there, you find the shlom is 2 days and 1 night, and it's subject to the rules of pigel. So who adin the bechor ikalamifrech mal shlomim chain teunin smicha unisachim utenuvas chazav shoik. You know why the shlomim is subject to the rules of pigel? Because it's a davar chomer. It has all these other restrictions. Ella, how would I know it? From me'im heyachel yoyachel. It says in the pasuk by Truma, im heyachel yeyachel mi bisar zevach shlomo. Heyachel is a klal, mi bisar zevach shlomo is a prat, and the second yeyachel is a klal. Klal pratu klal donin ke'ena prat, and that's why you would include a bechor. For the Gemara, this is not a klal pratu klal. This is a klal klalu prat. The two klalim are close to one another. That's not a klal pratu klal. Zog to Gemara. Hani trei klali dismichi adodinin. These two klalim are right near each other. Rava, so Rava teaches us that that's not a concern. I believe it's the sheet to change it to Ravina. Kida Amri b'Marava, like we say in Marava, Kol Mokem Shat HaMoiti Shnei Klolis HaSmuchim Zelazeh Hatel Prat Beineim V'Doinam B'Chlal Uprat. Beautiful. Next super. Achani Marba Loik Shemin Shal Mitzayra. The Mishnah says that from the Limudim, from Tumah to Noiser, and Noiser to Pigel, it includes everything, even the Loik Shemin Shal Mitzayra. Zok to Gemara Hamani Reb Meir. We know that this is subject to a machloikis tanoim, and Reb Meir holds that the loik shemin shel mitzayra, if it's brought near the carbon, near the osham, same day as the osham, then it will become pigel. But even Reb Meir's moida that if the loik shemin is brought 10 days later, it won't be pigel. So it's going to go to Reb Meir. The Tanya we learned in the Beraisa. So right away you need to ask. We have a Mishnah that tells us Reb Meir Shita. Why are we running to a Beraisa? So this question is actually asked by the Messiah Hashas. We never knew the Messiah that tells us anything other than Mar Mekaymis. But when it comes to Kachim, he gets in on the action. So you see there's a long Messiah Hashas, and he says, you know what? You find sometimes that even though there's a Mishnah we bring from Beraisas, and he has a whole shtickle over here, as you can see. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but he says it's not that unusual a thing for the Gemara to ask from a Beraisa. Zog to Gemara, the Tanya we looked at the Beraisa, Loik Shemen Shel Mitzayra, Chayovin Olav Mishum Pigel, you'll be Chayiv Pigel, Divrei Reb Meir. Zog to Gemara, if our Beraisa is following the Shita of Reb Meir, then we got a problem with Nesachim, because Reb Meir said that Nesachim also could be Pigel in our Mishnah. Yet in the Beraisa it says that Nesachim won't be pigel. That's going to be also no Rabbanon. That would have to go according to the Rabbanon, who holds that by Nesachim there is no din pigel. Again, you could have brought a raya from our Mishnah, but the Gemara brings a raya from a Beraisa. Etnan nische behema chayovin alei mishum pigel mipnei shedam hazevach matiran likarev de Reb Meir. if it's brought right near the Zavach, the dam of the Zavach are matir than the Sochem, and therefore it's a davar hamatir, it's a davar haniter. Amr Loi, the Chachamim argued in the Meir and told him, no, there's nothing pig on the Sochem. Maybe as a person can bring his carbon on Monday, and the Sochem and the Sochem can bring a week later even. So they're not connected at all. And therefore, they don't have a matter and a niter, they can't become pig. Amalan Meir said, agreed. But I agree, if he brought in the Sochem a week later, it would not be able to become pigel. I'm talking about the Sochem that he happened to have brought together with the Zevach. So where is the Machlokes Reb Meir and the Rabbanon? What type of Nesachim? Nesachim that are brought together with the Zevach. Nesachim that are not brought together with the Zevach, even Reb Meir holds can't be pig. He's only arguing if it's brought together with the Zevach, and there the Chachamim say even that cannot be pig. So we have a problem over here, because the Beraisa, when we're talking about Loik Shemen, passes like Reb Meir, and the Beraisa, when we're talking about Nesachim, is passing like Rabbanon. On Rabbi Yosef, Hamani Rabbi, you know what? Maybe this Beraisa is going according to Rabbi, who has a whole new innovative shot as to why by Loik Shemen there should be a din pigel. The Amar Loik Shemen shel Mitzayra matanoisav sharulo. The Loik Shemen of Mitzayra actually had two avodas. First, they spritzed it out on the Mizbeach, or they spritz it in the Azorah, and only after that did they put it on the boy in Yodai, on his earlobe and on his thumbs. So matanoisav, the matanis that you did on the Mizbeach first, they're shariloi. And therefore, umida matanoisav shariloi, matanoisav mefaglilei. So mineyube in the avodah of the Loik Shemen, there's a matir and there's a niter. The Tanya we learned, Loik Shemen shel Mitzayra. Before we do this Beraisa, let's just quickly have a look at Rashi. Amr Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi he v'savar lo k'Rabbanan, and he holds like the Rabbanan, in fact, that the Nesachim there's no pigala. The Hoyel ve'efsher lahavi Nesachim la'achar zman. Since the Nesachim do not have to be brought with the Zevach, therefore it's not connected to the Zevach. Ein dam hazevach mefaglon v'afilu avinima. Even if you happen to have brought it together, not like Reb Meir, like Rabbanan. What about Loik Shemen? Why don't you make that same argument? But Loik Shemen nami hadakatani nami pigol loy sheyei dama oshem mefaglon. It doesn't become pigol from the dama oshem. It becomes pigol mineu bay from its own avoda. Elamatonosh shemen atzmoi shemazem imenu sheva azois bifnim. The 7 azois of the oil of the Mitzayra that you're mazeh b'fnim, heim mefagdanoisai. They're the material to allow us to use the oil to put it on the boyin of the Mitzayra. So that's the matter that will be mefagdal. Imhiza almanas lechel shiyor of chutlas manoi, that will be pigol. V'hu nechel yoyim v'layla. This oil normally can be eaten for 1 day and 1 night. Kidabar minel lekaman imshar kochim. The Gemara lumps it together with other kochim, which are eaten normally for 1 day and 1 night. So Rebbe has an innovative shot. Zok to Gemara, the Tanya, where did Rebbe tell us this halacha? Loik shemen shel Mitzayra, the loik shemen of Mitzayra, you're maktish it. It becomes kochim. It becomes kedushas aguf. And therefore, my allen boy, you'll be mechuyev be'ilah, the Beraisa, ad sheyizroi hadam, until they spritz the dam from the osham on the mizbeach, then you're not moiling. Nizruk hadam, but if the dam is spritzed, loy nehenin midirabanan, you're still not allowed to have enough from this oil because you still didn't do the avodah that you need to do with the oil. But midiraisa, it's hutar because of the zrikas hadam from the osham v'loy moil. Rabbi Yomer moilin achiyitin matanoisa. You're moil in the oil until you actually spritz from the oil lufnim. So you see clearly, Rebbe holds that you have to be there has to be a matir of the zrika even on the oil. So it makes sense to say that by that matir, if you have kavanah to eat it, la'achar zmanoi, it will be considered pigel of chutz l'zman. V'shavin, but everybody agrees she'asur b'achila ad sheyitein matan sheva umatan b'hinos. Midaraisa, everybody holds you're not allowed to eat it, but the question is, if it needs the discharge of the heter. So Rebbe holds you needed to discharge. You need to discharge the kedusha of this oil by making the zrikas. But even if you don't need to, everybody agrees, you shouldn't be eating this oil until you've discharged all of the avoidance that must be done with it. So they said over Rabbi Yosef's shot in the Beraisa. Rabbi Yosef came up with this ingenious thing. It's not Rabbi Meir, it's going according to Rabbi, this innovative shot that Rabbi holds that Vibal, the loik shemen, requires Rika. And Vibal to Rabbi said that you're moil until you make this Rika of the loik shemen. Rabbi Yosef is stretching Rabbi Shita. Rabbi never talked about pigel. Rabbi just said that you'll be moil in the oil until you make this Rika from the oil. So Rabbi Yosef was saying, if Rabbi said that, vice the choice, it's like any other carbon. You need a heter. So therefore, if you had in mind the machshav of pigel by this Rika of the oil, it'll make it pigel. Zok Rabbi Yirmiyah. Rabbi Yirmiyah heard over Rabbi Yosef's shot. He says, I can't believe Rabbi Yosef said this. Omar, he said, Gaver Rabba, Rabbi Yosef, Lemach Yamilsa, was such a great person like Rabbi Yosef, say such a wrong shot. I'm not going to get into what a Gaver Rabba is right now, even though it's my favorite subject. Gaver Rabba, Rabbi Yosef, Lemach Yamilsa. Zok to Gemara, I'll prove to you that even Rebbe holds for sure it's not mifagel. Even though you have to make this rika in order to be matter the oil, but still it can't make pigel. Why? Because what if I brought the loik by itself? The lechul alma matanoisav sharile. There, everybody holds, even there one, everybody agrees that there is no heter of dam if it's not brought together with the osham. It's brought on its own a day or two later. Everybody holds that it will be osir b'me'ila until you make the zrikas of the oil. Nevertheless, everybody agrees v'loy mefaglinale. It will still not make pigel. The Tanya we learned loik shemen shal mitzayra chayovin alav mishum pigel. Why? Mipnei shedam matire lebahinus divrei Reb Meir. Yes, Reb Meir says that the loik shemen could become pigel. That's because the dam is matire, but no one holds the oil is matire. Amrullah the Reb Meir. So the Rabbanan told Reb Meir, "V'haloi adam mevi hashamay achshav v'loik mikan v'dasar yom." How could you say that the dam is going to be a matter on the oil when you don't even have to bring the oil with the dam? You can bring the oil a week later. Surely by then there's no dam, there's nothing left, so there's no heter on the oil. Amar lahen. So Reb Meir said, "Af ani lo yamarti ela b'ba'im ha'ashav." Even when I did say there's going to be a din pigel on the oil because of the matir of the zrikas adam of the osham, that's only if you brought the loik shemen together with the osham. So the loik shemen is there while the zrika is happening on the dam, it'll be matir. But if the loik shemen is not even around, it cannot even receive the heter of the dam, you only brought it a week later, even I will agree it cannot become pigel. And the Rabbanan hold that it's never going to be pigel. And Rabbi Yosef just wanted to say that really Rabbi agrees with Rabbi Rabbanan. But loik shemen is different. But you see clearly from the Rabbanan that the loik shemen is not different. So therefore, Zok Rabbi Yirmiyah, how in the world could Rabbi Yosef, the great Rabbi Yosef, have learned this pshat? Let's see Rashi. Haba b'fnei atzmai, mitzayra she'evi hashamei hayoim. The Mitzari brought his Osham on Monday morning. And he brought his loik shemen the next Wednesday. There everybody holds what's matter the oil bachila is the matnas zrika that you do with that oil. The hoil v'loikidish bekli kishenizrik dama Osham. This oil wasn't even in the Beis Hamikdash. It wasn't even in the Klei Sharis. It was chulin at the time that the Zrikas Ashram happened 10 days earlier. Therefore, Lav Shiraim Dideyu. You can't possibly say that the oil is the Shiraim of the carbon and the Zrika of the carbon is mattered when it wasn't even in existence when the Zrika happened. Nevertheless, even though everybody held in that case that the Zrikas oil is matter the oil, everybody agrees that Loi Mefaglin Le'Divrei HaKoil. Everybody agrees we want to make pigel. You know why? The aim by Mishum Pigel Kidikatani Afani Loyamarti. What did Reb Meir say? Reb Meir said, you hold it's not pigel, and even I don't say it's pigel. Nobody says it's pigul. So if nobody says it's pigul, how could Rebbe hold this pigul? Hilchach ba im ha'asham nami. If it came together with the asham Dr. Rabbanan, avagav dila Rebbe matanois of shoyin, even according to Rebbe, the matanos are being matir, the oil, loy mefagel, they wouldn't cause it to become pigul. She'ein mefagel el adam oy koimetz eshiyorav mishum de iskish mincha. The dam is going to be mefagel, the koimetz will be mefagel, but never will zrika of oil be mefagel, and therefore Rabbi Yirmiyah outright rejects Rabbi Yosef's argument that Rebbe would agree that the zrikas of the oil Meneu Bay can be mefagel. So now we have a problem, because the kasha was Reisha Reb Meir v'Sefer Rabbanon. The Beraisa says that the loik shemen will become pigul if you spritzed it near, if you brought the loik shemen near the asham, yet nesachim would not become pigul. What's the difference? It's going according to Reb Meir that side the loik shemen and side the nesachim can become pigul. The samay mikan nesachim, and in the sefer of the Beraisa, you're going to have to take out the word nesachim, because according to Reb Meir, you don't say that nesachim won't become pigul. Rather than the nesachim would become pigul, so we just have to edit the Beraisa and take it out of the sefer. Omar Abai is up to Abai. I don't need to do that. I have another way of answering. The Tzionim change it to Abaya Omar. I'm not sure what the connotation of Omar Abaya is versus Abaya Omar. So Abaya Omar L'olam Loisismi. Don't take out nesachim. In fact, even Reb Meir holds that there are certain cases where the nesachim will not become pigul. Where is that? V'tana loig haboim in asham, v'udin nesachim haboim in zevach. In the Reisha of the Beraisa, where the Beraisa said that the loig shemen there's a din pigul, and we said it's going to contract Meir, that means the loig shemen that you brought together with the asham, so you were able to get the heter of the zrika. In that case, the nesachim would be exactly the same. So loig shemen and nesachim, even though the Beraisa doesn't say so beferish, it means that as well. The Hadar Tana, and then the Sefer says nesachim abam b'fnei atzman, v'adin leloig abam b'fnei atzman would not be pigul. So in the ratio, when it says loig, it means loig and nesachim when they were brought together with the base carbon. And when it talks about nesachim in the Sefer that doesn't become pigul, it means nesachim that are brought by themselves, and who had in the loig brought by itself would not become pigul. Okay, Zog to Gemara weiter. We said that chados ha'oif, there's a din that once the dam is spritzed, the kohen can eat the chatos ha'oif. Where do you know that from? If you think about it, it's actually a nevela. The only way you're allowed to eat a bird is if you make shchita. But on this bird, they made malika. So Zog to Gemara chatos ha'oif, dama mater espesara l'kayhanim. Mina hanamili. How do I know that? The Tani Levi said, we have a pasuk that says, the Torah, right after the Ma'aseh of Korach, the Torah is reinforcing Aaron HaKohen's right to matnas kahuna, and the Torah said as follows: Zeh yeh lecha mikodesh hakodeshim. Aaron, you and your children are going to have this from the kodesh hakodeshim, min ha'esh from the fire. Kol karbonim, all karbonos, lechol menchosam, all menachos, ulechol chatosam, and all karbonos chatos, ulechol hashamam, and all karbonoshams, asher yashivu li, that will be returned to me. The Gemara is going to say that this is referring to Gezel Hager, Shemeis. Who does the money get returned to? To the Kohanim. Kodesh Kodeshim L'chahu U'Levanecha. It goes to you and your children. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu once again is reiterating all of the matnas kahuna that go to Aaron Ubana. So Zog to Gemara. It says Kol Karbanam. The rabbis loik shemen shel mitzayra, even the extra from the loik shemen of the mitzayra, that goes to Aaron Ubanav as well. Why would I need a pasuk to tell me that? Why wouldn't I know it anyway? So it says in the pasuk Zeh Yilacha Mikodesh HaKodesh Mina Eish. The loik shemen doesn't get anywhere near the fire. It's not like it's a carbon that was on the mizbeach. So therefore, because of Rachmana, the Torah says Mina Eish, v'hai lav Moshe Mina Eish, and the loik shemen is not Moshe Mina Eish, who Kamash Malon Kol Karbanam, even the loik shemen. It says L'chol Menchasam, L'rabbis Minchas Omer u'Minchas Haknois. Why would I think of Minchas Omer and Minchas Knois would not go to the Kohen? What does it say in the parsha of Menachos. It says va'achlu oisam asher kupar bahem. The pasuk is va'achlu oisam asher kupar bahem lamal leishad lekadosh oisam. It says what karbanos do the bnei Aaron get to eat? Karbanos that create a kapara, but karbanos that don't create a kapara, the kohanim don't have a right to eat. So uminchas oimer is not kapara, it's lahater, just to be matter the new crop. Osya, that's what it comes for. Uminchas kanois is not a kapara, it's just to make the soita process work. Levayer adam kasi. It's just coming to clarify whether or not this woman was chayte. Kamashulon, that even that the kohen gets. Ulechol chatosim, the pasuk says, it includes all chatosim. L'rabois chatas oif. This is what we're looking for. It tells you that the chatas oif is eaten. The meat of the chatas oif is eaten by the kohen. So kedai de chamina nevela. I would have thought it's nevela, and the kohen is not allowed to eat nevela. No, you can eat nevela. Kamashulon l'chol chatosim. Kohen can eat a bird, even though there was a malika done and not a shchita. The pasuk says, what else the kohen gets? L'chol hashamam. L'rabbis asham nazir v'asham mitzayir. Why would I think the asham nazir and the asham mitzayir should be different than every other asham that a kohen gets to eat from? So once again, the asham nazir and the asham mitzayir are not coming to be mechaber. They're coming just to the nazir to reset his cycle, and the mitzayir to reset him, to allow him to bring karbonis. Kamash malam, that even that the kohen gets. Frank Gemara, why do I need a pasuk of the Chol Hashama to say that a Mitzayra, the Hasham Mitzayra is eaten by a kohen? If you look in the parasha of Mitzayra, in Parashas Mitzayra, it says black and white. It says black and white that the kohen eats it. Rashi says this ki kachatos ha'osham hu, and the osham of the mitzayra is just like a chatos, and it's eaten. So oy bazoi, why do I need a pasuk that tells that? So we don't need it for mitzayra, we only need it for Hasham Nazir. El Rabbis Hasham Nazir that's eaten by the kohen, ki Hasham Mitzayra, just like the Hasham Mitzayra that we know as well is eaten by the kohen. It says Asher Yoshivu. Another thing that's given to the kohen is money that's returned. Ze gezel ager. That's gezel ager. Normally, if someone steals money from somebody and he swears that he didn't owe him money, and then he's moed al emes, he has to bring an asham gzelos, and he has to pay back the money carrying the chaimish. So normally, who do you pay back the money carrying the chaimish? To the victim of your theft. But what if your victim was a ger and he died? So now he has no yarshim. So who are you supposed to give the money back to? You give it to the kohen. L'chahu, it's yours, zok the Torah. Shalacha yiyah afilu lekadosh bo yisha. It's mamish your money. There's no kedusha on it. It's your money. It's chulin money, and it's your money that you could even be mekadosh a woman. Tanya Rabbi Elazar Omer b'shur mi'biyay shegli. Pigel b'davar. So now Rabbi Elazar sort of comes up the middle. We had one shita who held that the chatoyis hapnimiyos are all subject to pigel. We had Reb Shimon shita in our Mishnah, and today we had it in the Beraisa. Reb Shimon held the chatoyis hapnimiyos are not subject to the Isra Pigel at all, because you're not makrib the bosser on the Mizbech Achitzon, similar to the Shlamim. And now Rabbi Elazar comes up the middle. He says it depends. Pigel b'davar hanasa b'chutz. If while you were doing an avodah b'chutz, you were doing a shchita, if that's when you had a machshava pigel, it would be pigel. B'davar hanasa b'fnim. But if you were mafagel when you were spritzing the blood in the heichal, loy pigel. That wouldn't be a pigel, because that's not like the shlam. Keita. Let's get into the details. He was b'chutz shechting. Omar, and he said, I'm shechting with a machshava of pigel. Hareinu shoichet lahazois midamoy lemachar. I'm going to spritz the blood lemachar. That's not pigel. Loy pigel. You know why? Because the hazos adam is not in the mizbech achitzon. It's in the heichal. Shemechshava b'chutz b'davar anasa b'fnim loy pigel. While he was standing b'chutz doing shchita, that's good. That qualifies for pigel. But the problem is, what was his machshava? That he's going to do this rika that's done in the heichal. I'm going to do that at the wrong time. That's not pigel. But or in addition, what if he was doing this rika b'fnim? I'm spritzing with a machshava of pigel. Almanas lahakter a murib v'lishboich shirayim l'mocher, again like pigel, because even though the machshava was about a davar shebechutz, but he was having that machshava during an avodah shebefnim. Shemachshava befnim b'davar nasa bechutz. So when could it be pigel? But if he was shechting, v'yamar hareini shoichet lishboich shirayim l'mocher, I'm going to spritz the shirayim, which has to be done on the mizbech hachitzoin. I'll do that l'mocher. That is pigel, because there the machshava is bechutz, and it's about something that's done bechutz, b'davar nasa bechutz, and that would be pigel. Amar Rabbi Shua Levi, my kara. Where does it say in the pasuk? It says kasher yuram mishar zevach. It says in the parasha. It says in the parasha of the Oila, kasher yuram mishar zevach. This is, I believe, in the parasha of Par Koyin HaMashiach. I'm pretty sure that's where this is. The Par Koyin Mashiach Ksiv. That's right. So when it's talking about the Par Koyin Mashiach and explaining the imurim that you're marked on the Mizbeach, we already learned that the Torah is very detailed in telling us by the Par Koyin Mashiach exactly where the imurim are and where they're not. And it says there, due to the Par Koyin Mashiach, kasher yura mishar zevach hashlam. So, frankly, what in the world are we learning from Shlamim that we don't know already, because it was specifically itemized already from the Par Koyin Mashiach? My kasher yura mishar zevach hashlam. What could we possibly learn from a Zevach Hashlam? Meyata. Ella, you know what it's doing? This is what we're learning. Ella ma'akish par koi Mashiach l'shor Zevach Hashlam. Ma shor Zevach Hashlam. Achi u'maisav u'machshavoisav al mizbech hachitzayin. Just like we learned a moment ago from Rabbi Yosy Aglili, af par koi Mashiach. So basically, Rabbi Shua Levi is finding a makar to the Rabbi Yosy Aglili that we just quoted a minute. Amar Rab Nachman, Amar Rab Baravua, Amar Rav Halachik Rabbi Lazar. The halachas of Rabbi Lazar Shamar Mishum Rabbi Yosy. What did Rabbi Lazar say? Mishum Rabbi Yosy Aglili. He said it depends on what your machshava was during and what was it about, and he's passing the halacha. Right, Rava, Amar Rava. Why exactly is the Gemara being oisek in a halacha that's completely not relevant? It'll only be relevant when the Beis Hamikdash is going to be built. Oh, that's exactly a bias kasha. Why did we learn the Omasech Zevachim? Mamishir kasha. Mamishir kasha. Gewaltig. Ella, you know why we learn kachim? Because droish v'kabel schar. So Achanami, what's the wrong if he tells us the halacha? Droish v'kabel schar. Zog to Gemara, no. Hachi kamin lach. Hilchas halamali. Why did he have to tell us the halacha? Yes, he could lump them around and talk about it, but to tell me the halacha, that's not like it. That part I don't need. Halacha l'maisa. I'm sorry. No. Okay, then say that. Lish nachrina amale halacha kamina. I don't have a problem that he liked the pshat. He used the word halacha, which really is the same teretz. Why is he talking about halacha l'maisa? It's not halacha l'maisa nowadays, because nowadays Mashiach is not here. It's funny because the Gemara is very adamant about saying this, but the Chavetz Chaim reintroduced Kochim. The Briskers learned Kochim. Why? Because Mashiach is going to come. So vice versa, we are worried about Hilchos Mashiach, like what you said, but the Gemara wasn't worried about Hilchos Mashiach. What do you mean? We learned from Kiva thought it was going to be any day. When we learned the Gemara about Mashiach coming, every generation the Gedolim had some drasha. There was a Moshe Sharf in every generation. Okay, Baruch Hashem, we were saying to finish Daf Mem Daled. It's good. Mem Daled is Mem Daled, but Dam backwards. We're learning all about Zrikas Adam. So we should be to finish the